This girl ate a strange moth and vanished from everyone's sight. Now she has 24 hours to find the antidote, or she'll stay invisible forever. There are many things in this world that we can't see, like air or sound waves. But as it turns out, the word invisible can be used to describe people too. Let's take as an example two sisters, Molly and Cleo. Molly is one of the most popular girls in school, while Cleo, well, no one seems to notice her at all. The thing is, Molly is bright, outgoing, and adored by everyone. Cleo, on the other hand, is shy, withdrawn, and a little bit cynical. Another school day comes to an end. Mr. Perkins, the chemistry teacher, notices that Cleo is performing exceptionally well in his class and consistently scoring top marks on her tests. He offers the girl an unusual experiment and hands her a test tube with a mysterious substance. Cleo's task is to identify it and transform it into crystalline form. The girl is sure that it's impossible and complains to her classmate George that Mr. Perkins is making her life harder on purpose. Meanwhile, the whole school is buzzing with preparations for Halloween. Outside, a handsome guy named Carter approaches Cleo and offers to study chemistry together. Cleo is convinced he's just trying to use her, so she turns down the school heartthrob. After classes, Molly invites Cleo to join her boyfriend, Coog, and a few of her friends for ice cream. But once again, the protagonist turns her down. It seems like she's actively choosing a life of solitude. George gives Cleo a ride home on his scooter. As the girl arrives, she sees her parents getting ready to leave on a business trip. They ask their daughters to behave while they're gone. Molly casually mentions to Cleo that a few friends will be stopping by later. Cleo is horrified. She has homework to do. That evening, the house is overtaken by a massive party with more than 100 guests. Cleo doesn't take part. Instead, she's locked in her room, working on her chemistry project. She realizes that Mr. Perkins gave her an ordinary sugar solution, but she still can't manage to turn it into crystals. George suggests she take a break, but Cleo, as usual, refuses. The guy leaves to join the party and starts flirting with a girl named Nikki. Meanwhile, Cleo continues her experiments. She gets distracted by a moth fluttering nearby and accidentally spills some unknown chemicals into the solution. The liquid starts to evaporate instantly, and the vapor drifts toward the moth. Cleo quickly traps it in a jar, but then, to her shock, it vanishes right before her eyes. Cleo tries to catch the invisible moth with a net, since it still casts a shadow, but the insect flutters away, straight into the party. The girl runs through the crowd of surprise guests, swinging her net, while George begins to think his friend has officially gone crazy with her experiments. The moth manages to escape the house, leaving Cleo frustrated and upset. Eventually, the party winds down and everyone goes home. Molly gets ready for bed and heads to the bathroom to take her medicine. Suddenly, the very same invisible moth flies in through the open window. Apparently, it was attracted by the bright light. The moth flies too close to the lamp, burns its wings, and falls right into Molly's glass. The girl doesn't notice it and drinks her medicine along with the invisible moth. Soon after, Molly becomes invisible too. Neither sister suspects a thing as they head to bed. The next morning, Molly's alarm goes off. The now invisible girl wakes up, puts on her slippers, grabs her towel, and walks into the bathroom. She reaches for her toothbrush and glances at the mirror. But there's no reflection. Molly's scream wakes Cleo. The girl quickly realizes her sister has turned invisible and immediately connects it to the experiment from the night before. Molly panics, hoping this is just a bad dream. Unfortunately, it's real. She runs around the house and even considers calling 911. Cleo admits that it's all her fault. Molly remembers drinking something strange with her medicine last night. That must have been the invisible moth. It's Halloween today, and Coog drops by their house dressed as a bear. Cleo lies, telling him that Molly is seriously ill and asks him to leave. Cleo hopes that her sister will pee it out and become visible again in a couple of hours. Molly puts on a costume of Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, but an invisible girl in a dress and a hair bow looks pretty creepy. To make things worse, Molly must go to school since she has a big lacrosse game today. Unfortunately, her dress starts turning invisible. That's a disaster. So Molly asks Cleo to put on her costume and pretend to be her at school. The problem is that the sisters don't look much alike, and their personalities are completely different. To solve this, Cleo wears a mask, and Molly goes with her to whisper instructions along the way. Since Cleo doesn't have a driver's license, invisible Molly drives the car. Thankfully, the police don't notice anything suspicious. Finally, the sisters arrive at school. Cleo is extremely nervous, but no one seems to notice the switch. Everyone easily believes she's Molly. Coog shows up and tries to kiss Cleo, thinking she's his girlfriend. The main character lies, saying she has a very contagious illness, and quickly runs away from him. Cleo, disguised as Molly, heads to the lacrosse team's pre-game meeting. There, all the girls hug each other and exchange a flood of compliments. Each one takes a turn holding the bunny of truth and shares something deeply personal. When it's Cleo's turn, the protagonist confesses that she's not who everyone thinks she is. The other girls just laugh it off, thinking she's joking. Invisible Molly sneaks into the chemistry classroom and steals a microscope so Cleo can continue her experiment and make her sister visible again. The girl overhears a conversation between George and Carter. To her surprise, Carter really likes Cleo. Moreover, it turns out he's not just a dumb jock, he's actually super smart and a total chemistry genius. Molly smirks slyly, grabs the microscope, and bolts out of the room. Meanwhile, Coog, who had way too many meatballs the night before, rushes to the school bathroom in the middle of the day to relieve himself. Molly secretly follows him, and while he's on the toilet, she swipes his bear costume. The girl puts it on and races back to the chemistry lab. There, she finds Carter, pretends to be Cleo, and sets up a date with him for that evening. Later, Molly meets up with her sister and proudly announces that she will go on a date with Carter tonight. George finds Molly and Cleo, or rather, he sees Cleo dressed as Molly, talking to a headless bear that suddenly disappears right in front of him. Totally freaked out, George demands an explanation. The sisters have no choice but to tell him the whole truth. Just then, Coog shows up, complaining that someone stole his bear costume. The girl runs away from him again. Later that day, the big lacrosse game begins. Cleo is terrified, and Molly tries her best to encourage her sister. At first, everything goes terribly. Cleo doesn't know how to hold the stick, runs in the wrong direction, and can't even catch the ball. Well, it looks like her team is going to lose. Molly confesses to her sister that lacrosse means everything to her, and her chances of getting into college depend on her performance in this game. Cleo realizes she can't let her sister down. They decide to play together to double their strength. Their tactic works brilliantly, and soon Molly's team manages to even the score. Cleo complains she's exhausted, but she's willing to do anything for her sister, so she gives a motivational speech to the team and keeps playing. There are just 30 seconds left in the match when Cleo scores the winning goal all by herself. Their team wins. The crowd lifts Cleo up and chants, "Molly," while the real Molly is only now beginning to understand what it truly means to be invisible. Back home, Cleo and George study Molly's cells under the microscope. Cleo realizes that her sister's invisibility will become permanent unless she takes the antidote before midnight. The protagonists need to repeat the experiment from the night before. They need a sugar solution, some chemical reagents, and another moth. The sisters go to the cemetery to catch a moth. They use a bright lantern to lure in at least one insect. Thanks to the night fog and moonlight, Molly becomes partially visible. The girls spot a moth and start chasing it through the cemetery. It lands on a tree, and Molly climbs up after it, but she slips and falls. Molly gets out of the water and has a meltdown at her sister. She loses hope and yells at Cleo, blaming her for everything that's happened. In response, Cleo admits that she's always been jealous of Molly's popularity. Soon the sisters forgive each other and finally manage to catch a new moth. They head to the school lab, where George is already waiting for them. On the way, Molly confesses that she's also been jealous of her sister. After all, Cleo is so smart and well-educated. The girls arrive at the school and meet up with George. They have to get past the security guard. Using her invisibility, Molly gives the poor man a hell of a scare and makes him abandon his post. Thanks to that, Cleo and George sneak into the chemistry classroom and try to recreate the experiment. Unfortunately, the chemical formula turns out to be too complex. Neither Cleo nor George can figure it out. Then George remembers his conversation with Carter. He's a true chemistry genius. and they really need his help. The protagonists search for Carter at the annual Halloween charity party. Cleo accidentally bumps into Coog, and the guy admits that he really loves Molly and is afraid of losing her. It turns out Molly has strong feelings for him too. While looking for Carter, George runs into Nikki and asks her on a date. She happily agrees. Eventually, Cleo finds Carter. Since she was dressed as a bear, the guy showed up wearing a costume of a honeypot. That's incredibly sweet. But right now, there are more important things than Halloween. Cleo brings Carter to the barn where George, Cog, and Molly are hiding and explains the situation to him. There's very little time left. Cleo, George, Carter, and Cog team up to create the antidote for Molly. They gather the necessary ingredients at the party and prepare a chemical compound that should make Molly visible again. 30 seconds before midnight, Mr. Perkins bursts into the barn. Instead of drinking the antidote, invisible Molly dumps flour on herself and tells the teacher about her sister's experiment. Only after that does she drink the antidote. But she stays invisible. Could it be that Molly was too late? Everyone is horrified. Mr. Perkins is in shock. Molly suddenly remembers that yesterday she didn't just drink a glass of water. There was an antacid in it. Cleo quickly adds another tablet to the antidote and asks Molly to drink a second dose. Molly does and becomes visible. It's a victory. Mr. Perkins is amazed by Cleo's incredible experiment and asks her to present her project at his science conference. Then Carter approaches the protagonist and invites her to dance. She agrees. After all, she doesn't want to be invisible anymore, not even metaphorically. It's so much nicer when people can really see you, don't you think?